On a new Christmas season, and we have great expectations that as the adversary is at work throughout our society to work evil and despair, that God is going to counter the devil. And there are some great things that are coming for the people of God as we continue to keep our eyes on God. And I'm glad about that this Advent season. I have expectation. There are some troubling signs. There are some troubling events. I ask that you would continue to keep in prayer that family that visits us regularly who will be saying goodbye to their grandson tomorrow at Northwestern Unity Baptist Church. And that will happen at 11, and the funeral will begin at 11:30. But I mention that to say that as we're anticipating great things, there are troubling signs that the devil's days are numbered. And it seems as if the adversary is working overtime through people who are allowing themselves to be used by him. Thanks for the cards and the tokens of love that I see every day when I go into my office. There's a new card, there's a new little bag, and so I want to say thank you. Let us pray as we think about the thought, help that comes from beyond the hills or the high places, help that comes from beyond the hills or the high places. Dear God, we ask that you would take this word and use it for your purposes, because we've been taught that your word will not return void when you send it out to accomplish that which you have purposed it. Now, God, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be found acceptable in your sight. God, you are our strength and you are our Redeemer. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen again. Help from beyond the hills and the high places. Are you feeling a bit anxious today, even as you sit in the nave, which is commonly known as the sanctuary? As God's covenant people, even as we meet and greet and sing and pray and reflect upon the Advent season and listen to scripture and look at one another face to face or on Zoom face to face, underneath the surface, underneath what can be seen by the naked eye, many of us still might feel a lack of sanctuary, a lack of peace. Some of us might feel overwhelmed even though it's Advent. Some of us might feel under attack and traumatized by life, by issues, by problems, by a stream of bad news. As we battle demons of the mind and threats to our souls, as we grapple with day-to-day stressors and those sources of anxiety which sometimes seem to swirl around us, parading through our minds like a sinister marching band, playing tunes of spiritual doubt, uncertainty, foreboding, and fear. Even for the most faithful among us, it can sometimes be hard to find true sanctuary even in the sanctuary or on Zoom worship. What are we to do when what the Bible describes as perilous times are now seemingly an everyday part of our 2021 America and world? How are we to maintain our calm and faith as we hear about new variants related to COVID-19, as we keep seeing persons who are living in denial, folk all around us, both black and white, who act like this plague is not a plague and that vaccines are not a huge gift from God? How are we to feel cool, calm, and collected as we hear about tornadoes destroying lives and dreams from Kentucky to Nashville, all the way up the Midwestern line? What are we to do as we read about senseless acts of gun violence taking very, very young lives, both abroad and close to home, from Oxford to Detroit? What are we to do as we see exhibited on our daily news disunity, disloyalty, and anti-democratic winds which seem to be blowing just like that tornado in our direction? As we try to focus on the central message of Advent, the fact that God's immeasurable goodness and love and grace has appeared in the face of the baby born in Bethlehem, who grew up to destroy the works of the devil, preaching liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, good news to the poor and healing for the brokenhearted. We can still, even though we know that's what he announced once he grew up in his inaugural hometown sermon, we can still feel like we are sitting on pins and needles, especially if we have just received a not so great health prognosis, or we're worrying about someone else who has, or if we are unclear about the future of an aging parent who needs more care, or an irresponsible child now addicted to opioids. All of these things together, can you say together? All of these things together can make it quite tough for us to center ourselves in the sacredness of this Advent moment, because we know instinctually, whether it is the Christmas season or not, that what Abraham Joshua Heschel said is true. And he said this, that in every hour is filled with both perils and possibilities. Every hour is filled with both peril and possibilities. And in 2021, it sometimes feels as though the perils are trying to put our possibilities in a permanent stranglehold to the death of them. As alluded to in the outset, Paul describes a series of these strung together moments as perilous times. Thomas Paine, that great American patriot, said these kinds of seasons are the times that try men's souls. And to be inclusive, they try women's souls too. Paine goes on to say that in such times, the summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in the crisis, shrink. Sisters and brothers, as I think about Paine, as I think about Paul and what they have said, there is a lot in the world to make us feel small, like a little cog in the machinery of the wheels of life. There is so much going on to make us feel like shrinking summertime soldiers and patriots who are only committed to battle when the sun is shining the brightest. But when it's cloudy, we lose a degree of courage. This is even true for the preachers, the priests, and counselors among us. We all need help today. We all need help in these times. We all need help from God in these very traumatizing times. My heart was grieved when I heard about a sister of faith, an African-American woman. In her late 60s, she was murdered recently in a church restroom. Police discovered that it was one of the migrant workers, another person of African descent. He was involved in a program that the church was offering. She was overseeing the sign up for this program. It was the first day people could sign up for this program. Somehow, allegedly, he accosted her and killed her in the restroom. What people did not know was that he had violent tendencies and a record of sexually criminal behavior. We are living in tough times, perilous times, evil days. But we are not the first generations to live in such times. Look at the biblical and historical records. People of all cultures, of all races, of all faiths have had to endure insufferable burdens. Since the prehistoric and primal times of Cain and Abel, there has been evil and injustice coursing across the land, causing people to have to stand over wood, stone, and rock monuments of remembrances for their dearly departed loved ones. Not wanting to say goodbye, but they've had to say goodbye because death has come. And we have seen many down throughout history, countless persons, every person who has lived and had their wits about them, they've had to stand in front of tombs of solemn goodbyes. In fact, in some sordid and maybe some selfish way, there may be a bit of relief in knowing that we are not the only generation of people who have had to deal with perilous times. We are not alone in this struggle. Our ancestors have had to deal with these kinds of issues and problems and pains and predicaments. But the question must be asked, how did we arrive here? How did we get here? And is there help available that can empower us to cope and to help us to hope, even though there is peril in the land? According to the Christian tradition, looking through the lens of the African bishop Augustine's theological emphasis on original sin, the fall in the garden was the starting point of humanity's downward spiral toward fear, anxiety, dismay, disunity, and even death. We tried to be God in that garden without listening to God. God said you cannot handle the pure knowledge of good and evil, so don't eat the fruit of that tree, and yet we ate it anyway. He promised that in the day that you eat of this fruit, you will die spiritually, morally, and you will begin dying physically. Trust me on that. Obey me on that. And I will feed you what you need to know, because I have made you in my image and in my likeness. But instead of listening to the one who has our best interest in mind, instead of listening to the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, we rebelled against our Creator and we listened to the serpent, a walking, talking, seductive liar who did not love us, did not make us. The devil didn't make us, did not plant us in this thing that we call life, but instead he has hated us because we are made in the image of the one he hates the most. And then he deceived us and in a very real sense killed us using our own thought processes in hand. Sisters and brothers, be very careful about trusting the voices of those who promise you the moon and the stars, and yet they have not deeply invested in your well-being. They have no history with you or your people. They don't know your family doesn't know them. They have not been fully vetted and their reputations cannot be verified. They have no long legacy of being involved in the institutions and organizations that are important to you and you think are significant to God. Be very careful about trusting someone who's a smooth talker and yet might be very well a crooked walker. We need folk, it's okay to be a smooth talker if you're a straight walker. But now if you're a smooth talker and a crooked walker, you are a problem to be avoided. Humanity fell as Augustine described it. Consequently, that great theologian Paul Tillich says that this state of anxiety in which we live is just a fact of life now. Our experience is sometimes just what Marvin Gaye described in his song, Trouble Man. 3 things I know: taxes, death, and trouble. Y'all been listening to more than sacred music. So anxiety and even fear comes with life as it is today. But sisters and brothers, the amazing good news is that during each historical period, there have been people who have survived and even thrived with their sanity, their morality, and humanity in check. And I don't know about you, but I want to be one of those who have survived and are thriving with my sanity, morality, and humanity before God in check. Because at some point, those who have accomplished or been blessed to accomplish that experience, they adopted the same perspective that is found in this morning's psalm, Psalm 121, one of my favorite psalms. And they came to know that God continues to be at work in their lives, helping to deliver us from all sorts of perils in perilous times. And in such cases, like what the psalmist notes in Psalm 121, God gave them the faith and the insight to know that God is their helper and their deliverer from all manifestations of evil. I don't know about you, but I thank God that we have a conversation partner in the author of our text in Psalm 121. He is our conversation partner. I have been meditating and claiming this psalm for nearly 2 years, ever since the pandemic hit us. I have been claiming it and quoting it like never before. And maybe all of us can learn anew and have our primal anxieties and fears calmed as we lay claim to the promises found in this psalm. What of this psalm? Many believe that Psalm 121 is one of the songs of David, the gifted shepherd king, the warrior, the theologian, and songwriter. David has seen much good, or had seen much good in his life and much trouble in his life. Since the days of his youth, David was chosen by God and by the prophet Samuel to be the next king of Israel after Saul abdicated his moral and spiritual responsibilities before God. And so he was chosen by God. But he was also at the same time targeted by the forces of evil and the enemies of Israel for destruction. You see, sisters and brothers, when God has anointed and appointed you to be a blessing in God's kingdom, to be a blessing in your church, to be a blessing to your people and all people, to be a blessing in your family, to be a blessing in your neighborhood, the devil will try to stop your progress. Because the devil is about evil. The devil is about disintegration. The devil is about fragmentation. Though anointed and declared the next king, even as a teenager, ironically, he had to fight for meaning and recognition among his own brothers and his daddy Jesse. But that's not all. David had to fight and win battles against the Goliaths of Israel's enemies and against the Goliaths of his own soul, which caused him to sin and act the opposite of the man who God had made him to be. And each step along the way, David was also exposed to tragedy. It is this David who had been bitten by the serpent and once or twice in his life at least acted like the serpent, who struggled with his own sins, anxieties, fears, and perils, who is writing this great psalm. And as David writes this poetry, which would be set to music, this song, one of the 15 or so psalms that are called ascent psalms, which are Psalm 120 through Psalm 134. Preacher, what's an ascent psalm? An ascent psalm is a psalm that was meant to be sung or recited as the worshipers of Israel, of Jerusalem, ascended the high hills and marched as they went to worship in the temple or as they went to worship in the tabernacle. Many scholars believe David wrote these psalms with the intent that they would be sung by religious pilgrims who needed existential assurances and affirmations as they climbed and walked up toward the place where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, which would eventually become the location of the temple in Jerusalem. Since Jerusalem is built on a series of hills, it was a location which required the faithful, it required temple folk or church folk to march upwards toward the Temple Mount area to praise Yahweh. I wonder if we had to walk up high hills to get to church, how would our attendance be pre-COVID or post-COVID or during COVID? I think our attendance numbers would be lower than they are even now. So David wrote this piece in order to encourage the sometime weary traveler that God is worthy to be trusted, that God is worthy to be praised, even as we ask questions and face steep terrain. This reminds me of something a pastor friend of mine has shared when he wrote, "Following God does not mean that there will be no events to ponder that will not cause us to question God. But following God just ensures that as we question, there will be a quest to keep trusting God anyway, even as we have questions." I believe all of us are on such a quest this morning. Listen to David's anointed thoughts again as he pens these powerful words. "I will look to the hills," and then the question, "from whence cometh my help rather." The answer, my help, and maybe even my health, comes from the Lord. From his opening line, after lamenting about enemies and haters and liars in Psalm 120, that's the theme of the prior psalm, the previous psalm, Psalm 120. He's lamenting that he has to deal with enemies and haters and liars. David has a new focus in the very next psalm. The very next psalm, a focus which shifts his thinking upward toward higher things. "I will look up toward the heights from my position of pain, from the perils that surround me and surround my community." This looking up is a testimony. It is wise advice for us today. David says, "I will look upward to the high places, to the hills around Jerusalem. I will change my focus and look up." Can you say look up? My former mentor, the late great Dr. William Hanna, a pastor I served under when I was in seminary, we would be sitting in some contentious meetings every now and then. And he would look over at me and he would do this. He would just start raising his hands up in the air like that. And the first time he did it, I wondered, was he okay? I just looked at him and then he would lean over and say to me, "Greg, you might be wondering what I'm doing. But what I'm doing, I am reminding myself to be in charge of my own insanity. I'm not going to let others drive me crazy in this meeting." He also said, "I'm also transcending victimization." I was like, "Dr. Hanna, transcending victimization?" He said, "Yeah, I'm making sure that even though I feel like I'm stuck in this meeting, that I am rising higher and higher, higher and higher. I'm transcending victimization. I'm not going to be a victim to this moment." David, speaking from his personal experience, says that to transcend victimization, to rise above it, sometimes weary travelers have to look up for help toward heights beyond us. This was not a unique thought at the time. The ancient proponents and practitioners of various cultic religions for centuries and centuries have sought to find God and supernatural help in the high places. They have tried to guide people to look beyond themselves and toward the skies, to look toward something higher than the self or the situation they are in. "I will look to the hills, to the high places. I will look to something that is above me and beyond me." This, my sisters and brothers, is a helpful practice as we are living in perilous times. I remember nearly 2 years ago, I was on a lunch break. I was serving as a teacher, a history teacher, at a high school in Flint. It was a tough placement, and it was a tough day. And as I drove to lunch, I was moved to look upwards because it was a cloudy day. I was feeling down. It was cloudy inside. I think I'd been cussed out several times. Nobody seemed to want to learn anything about Watergate. I think that's what we were studying at that time in the curriculum, that the history curriculum I was sharing. I don't think anybody cared about Watergate or the events that led up to it. So I'm feeling kind of down. And all of a sudden I heard something inside me as I got closer to McDonald's, which said, "Look up." And I looked up to my side, and beyond the clouds, I saw the most beautiful blue sky that one could imagine. And as I was driving, it seemed like just that look up gave me a little bit of help and hope and energy to go back to the school and face what I had to face. Often when events become frightening and discouraging and they ignite and invoke our fears, when situations become almost unbearable, the natural human response is to turn inward and isolate. Have you ever turned inward and just felt like isolating, being by yourself? That's okay sometimes, but it might not be the best course of action to do that all the time. Often the default human response when we face significant problems is to cast our hats in with the kind of philosophy put forth by Rene Descartes when he said that the key to life is to doubt everything except what is going on inside of the self, where thinking and contemplation take place. Cogito ergo sumus. I think, therefore I am. But when trouble's larger and greater than your I am, we need to be in touch with the greater and higher I am. We need someone greater than the self to manifest in our lives. We need to focus on something greater than us. Unless we are looking inward to get in connection with the Holy Spirit, that should be maybe the one exception. But with that exception in mind, we ought to look upwards and outwards towards something beyond us, because when the enemy comes in like a flood, we by ourselves are not enough to help us to overcome. Often to climb out of being down in the dumps, we have to get up from out of the dumps. Look to the hills, elevate your soul and spirit, see who you can help during your downtime. Fix your eyes on someone else's problem and see how you can provide a remedy, because that is looking up. Enjoy some good music that will get your mind off of your issues. That is looking upward. Put on some Whitney and Aretha. Throw on a little Jill Scott and even some Beyonce. Dust off your Maxwell and New Edition. I'm aging myself, I know. And even some Donny Hathaway joints, as they sing about something sensible or inspirational, like love and like trust, like the condition of our people and how there's hope on the horizon. Or listen to whomever you like, but make it someone who can lift your soul. Elevate your mind. Read a good novel. In the quietness of the day, take a break and meditate on some poetry. Paint. Get out your paintbrushes. Paint. Get out your coloring, your crayons, and do some coloring. Get out your pens and sketch. Go dance safely with your mask on. I got so many friends on social media. They're hanging out at night spots right now, celebrating birthdays, celebrating everything else, and none of them have on masks. And I'm thinking, do they think just because you've been vaccinated once, everything is everything? No, we've still got to be cautious, my sisters and brothers. But then go out and dance. Take your precautions and go out and dance. Go for a drive in your favorite car. If you don't have a favorite car, drive whatever car you have and then drive it to your favorite spot. Ride out to Belle Isle. Open the roof. Look at the stars. Look at the ships passing by. Let your imagination take flight. Adopt an Otis Redding philosophy, who said he was sitting at the dock of the bay watching the tides roll away. Elevate your mind. Edify your heart with good things, high things, noble things. Get away and look up toward the high places. But looking up is not enough, as I close with this second point. David further clarifies what the upward look should consist of, and he goes deeper. Here, David departs from the pagans, and he just does not say that it's important for us to look up to the high heights. That's a good thing. Elevating our minds and interests, those are wonderful gifts. However, this is not the zenith point of our search. To find lasting help, decisive help, the upward look is not just to gaze toward the hills and the mountains or the stars or to our favorite pastimes. It is not just a tour of the mountains on the way to Jerusalem. It is possible that too many people are only looking for help from the high hills of political parties today. We expect that our political investments alone will give us the kind of help that satisfies and satiates whatever ails us and ails society. Now, we must be informed. We must vote. We must make our voices heard as responsible citizens. But last time I checked, elephants and donkeys do not sit high enough and cannot heal the deep pathologies and pain we experience enough to make an ultimate difference. When our families are hurting, when our families are at war, when our neighbors are embroiled in some kind of crisis, or even when the church is not all that it should be. Newsflash, sometimes even the institutional church is not enough of a high heel to adequately help us. Oh, I know we love church. Black folks, we've loved church since the days of human enslavement. The church has been our anchor. The church has been our community of hope. The church has been our community of redemption. The church has been our rock and our help as we've heard about Jesus, as we've shouted until our hearts are content, or as we've sat very pensively and listened to moral instruction, which helped us to live better lives. The church has been a blessing, but the church is not a high heel enough, or it's not enough of a high heel for us to focus our entire attention on. David says, I lifted my eyes and started looking upward, but let me clarify in lyrical form where my real help comes from. And using my sanctified imagination, I can hear David saying to us too, you should clarify it too, my sisters and brothers. Listen, I am looking toward the hills, but not directly at the hills as the object of my deepest faith commitments and hopes, because the hills are just hills. From whence cometh my help? My ultimate help, my help comes from Jehovah or Yahweh, the Lord, the great I am that I am. The self-existent one, the forever eternal one. Yahweh is just because he wanted to be. Nobody aided Yahweh to come into existence. Yahweh needed no help to be. It was revealed to Moses that Yahweh, the I am that I am, who always is, who always will be, is the true helper of Israel and the church. As they were being whipped into submission, dying off under the strain of Egyptian whips and insanity, Yahweh revealed to Moses in the burning bush that I have heard the cries of my people. God hears your cries too. God is no respecter of persons. God is no respecter of nations. God hears the cries of everyone who's going through perilous times and they just need some help. And God says to the Israelites, I'm going to show up and show out on your behalf. And in that day, the Egyptians and my people, and even you, Moses, will know that I am the helper and your helper forever and ever and ever. Sisters and brothers, Yahweh can help us because he is the maker of heaven and earth. He is not just the God of a certain clan, but the God of all peoples of faith. David said, my help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. And no one can outdo Yahweh. No one can out-strategize Yahweh. Nothing can intimidate Yahweh. Yahweh is not distant. Instead, he is deeply invested. The creator of all human beings, the creator of all flesh. Oh, I just read about a rescue of a woman. Unfortunately, she did not survive. But let me tell you what went into the rescue. She somehow had ended up driving into the Niagara Falls, and it started taking her car toward those falls, and I guess she succumbed in the process. But as her car was being carried by the rushing currents to the falls, a series of complicated plans and actions took place to save her. First, a drone was launched from wherever it was launched from. The winds were horrible. The rain and the sleet was coming down. And yet that drone was one of the best drones that the rescuers had in their arsenal. And they sent it out, and first they looked and toured the car to see was there anyone inside and what condition the car was in. Was it stuck on something? And it was just temporarily stuck on something. Then the drone left. Then they sent the helicopter. They had to fuel up the helicopter. They had to get the rescuers in. They had to place the right rescuers on the spot. They had one man from the Detroit area who was trained in this procedure where you would come down from the helicopter on a rope of some kind of cable. He came down using the cable, and he had to open the passenger side door because he saw that the person was closest to that door, currents pushing up against the door. He got the door open, didn't know whether she was alive or dead, wrapped her around his arm, gave the signal. They pulled them up slowly because it was a very dangerous situation, especially as he was pulling her out of the car, because the car could have broken loose and taken them all over the falls. As I read the story, I felt saddened that she passed. But I said, oh, look at the effort and the resources that went into rescuing her. And as I take my seat, I want you to think beyond that. As we think about where our help comes from, God has invested all kind of resources in trying to save our lives. He sent Jesus, which was a revelation of himself to humanity. He came down 42 generations to rescue us and deliver us, dying for all of our sins and debauchery, then rose from the dead. God provided some kind of celestial escort for his son as he ascended up to glory. And then he sent the Holy Spirit down on the community of faith to appear like fire and cloven tongues. And then we have the word of God that we can read about the promises of God. And we are blessed by sisters and brothers who are testifying every day and every week, trying to encourage one another. Look at the investment of God. And then we have the gift of prayer. When we find ourselves in real perilous times and we don't know where to turn, we can always say our prayers to God. God, I need your help. I need your deliverance. And when we cry out to God like that, God will send extra resources to the rescue. I thank God that David closes the hymn. This hymn, it's really a hymn. This psalm is really a hymn. David says, this God never slumbers nor sleeps. The one who keeps Israel, he doesn't slumber nor sleep. He will not allow your foot to be moved. He will be your shade at your right hand, so that when you're facing persecutions and difficult times, you don't have to wither, because God will provide for you shade miraculously and cover you. And not only that, when you go out and when you come in, God will be with you both now and forevermore. And he will protect you from all evil, even that evil which tries to snuff out your soul. Oh, I thank God that God is the kind of God who provides help from beyond the high hills. Sisters and brothers, maybe there's one here today as we think about all that God has invested in us, all of the resources God has provided, all of the prayers God is still willing to answer. Oh, we have a reason to shout this Advent season. Oh, God is a good God. Thank God for the baby Jesus, but thank God for Jesus as Lord. Maybe there's one here today, you want to receive Jesus Christ as your Lord. He will make your life brand new. What he's done for countless others, he will do for you. Won't you come and give your life to Jesus Christ? We invite you to come. Won't you come? There's nothing better. Maybe you want to recommit your life to Christ.